Welcome. Appreciate you joining me today. I am James Graham. I work out of our California office, been with MarshBerry for 10 years. And today we're talking about pathways to increasing equity value. This is the first part of a three-part series. And the number one thing we're going to focus on in this first series is how to cultivate undercurrent of organic growth. Here's a little bit of my contact information. If you have questions at the end, you can take a picture of this. I'd be happy to talk to you. Briefly, want to give you an update on MarshBerry. We are currently international. We have about 8 offices, 9 offices, 200 employees, 300 licenses. Our focus and the core of who we are is in data analytics. So in this slide, you're going to see a lot of data that we've cultivated. We have the largest platform of agency financials in the world. And so that is the core of our advice. Then we also provide a lot of consulting in our growth advisory around organic growth, the topic of today, around talent acquisition, around sales performance. We provide valuation reports. We help with financial fine tuning. And then we also have our investment banking team, which I spend the majority of my time on, which is buy and sell side M&A, debt and equity capital raising, and all things capital stack as you continue to use money to grow and build your firms. So 3-part series on increasing your equity value. The first pillar is organic growth. Second is operational efficiency. And then finally, we're going to end with capital structure. So when you think about equity value, the number that is a governor on the whole thing is how fast are you growing. And so today I'm going to focus on organic growth is how you leverage your internal resources, especially your talent. This is a talent-driven business to grow. And we're going to focus on organic growth. So apart from inorganic growth, which we'll talk about in part 3, capital structure, because what we find is that firms that can grow organically, apart from inorganic growth, will have much higher value, much more control of their destiny, and become top performing firms. Firms that grow solely through acquisition tend to run into valuation challenges down the road and haven't built the proper engine of growth to keep the business a long-term success. So why focus on growing equity value? Equity value is the output that tells you that you're creating something that's more valuable for your employees, for your clients, for your strategic partners, for your shareholders. It is what signals that what you have been doing is providing the best options for that class of individual. Firms that are growing equity value are consistently becoming better in every single way that is measurable, not just equity value. So it's not that we're concerned about equity value for equity's sake. It's the growth in equity value is a measure that you are growing value across your stakeholder universe. So how do you gain ground? It's important to aggressively pursue organic growth. Organic growth is not easy. There are times in market cycles, the last few years, where it was a little bit easier. You have a hard market if you can retain your clients, especially on the commercial side. Health insurance has been a little more difficult, but it was easier in the past. But it's something that you have to aggressively pursue. You have to think about the future and how things are going to change. Growing 10% a year, which is not, we recommend 15, but growing 10% a year is much harder when you're 50 million in revenue than when you're 10 million in revenue if you don't think about the future. You have to think about the fact the market's going to change on you. It's going to fluctuate, and you have to be prepared for that. You need to materially outperform in good times so that you can perform well in bad times. And then you have to think about how you diversify different revenue streams across your niche focuses. And so we're going to talk a lot about how do you build niches, how do you create strength and stability outside of whatever area you continue to win. We see a lot of firms that can win in one area for a period of time, but when they tap that out, they never thought through, well, how do we diversify? How do we continue to grow outside of what took us to the place that we're at? So we're going to talk about maximizing growth through market specialization first. There are riches in the niches, as the saying goes. It's important to identify and focus on specific niches. And it's not that your firm needs to be niche only. Your firm can have multiple niches. Your firm can be a generalist firm, but your practitioners need to not be generalists. The generalist basically states that you're not really that great at anything. You're okay at maybe a number of things. And so it's important to work with your salespeople and have verticals within your firm that go deep, that make your client feel like that you know their business better than they know their business, and then gives them the comfort to act to buy the right amount of coverage or the correct amount of coverage, or if they don't, at least to understand why they might not, and that they're going to trust you. And then that trust is going to create better retentions and create referral sources. It's going to create your ability for you to create extra programs. It's going to give you a lot of strength that your local competitors that do not have niche expertise will not have. So how do you grow and define, niches? It's good to have defined, clear approaches. You want to build multiple niches within your firm over time, especially once you get over that 10 million revenue things. And then you want to have target outreaches. You want to make sure that your marketing materials, your collateral are all built on where your salespeople and your carrier market pair to deliver the most value to your clients. You don't want to have generalist marketing. You're not going after, if you're too broad and you don't build deep expertise and you haven't really thought through it, you are going to pull the lowest end of risk out there and potentially build an agency on clients that are not the most efficient from a revenue and service mix. Let's talk about books of business, because where this gets manifest, where niches really start to show is when you start looking at a producer's book of business and your firm's predictive business, you just say, where are we spending our time and resources, and does it make sense? So the 80-20 rule has been around in this industry for over 100 years. This is nothing new to anyone who's been paying attention. But we challenge you to do this. Take a producer's book or your firm's book and cut it up and look at the top 20% of clients by count, and you will find typically it's around 80% of your revenue. And you'll also, and go further, start finding out who is causing the most amount of pain for your service and structure, and you'll find they're in that typically in that bottom 80%. Not every time, but typically in that bottom 80% of clients that only contribute 20% of your revenue. What niching does, that we talked about before, and having deep expertise, it allows you and your salespeople to move up market and increase the size in that top 20%. And if you're focused on keeping people focused where you want them to be, you can actually do better than the 80-20. The 80-20 is often what happens when you're not putting the effort in to potentially swing your book. I mean, there's one agent I know about that just said, look, every producer gets 80 or 50 clients. And they grew that way, and they're still growing tremendously because they've said we don't let people just focus on anything, and their clients set grows and their book grows, and they don't follow the 80-20 rule because they've already taken care of that. Their books would show something much more advantageous. So we think you want to do this analysis of your book of business on a regular basis, and you want to identify the least profitable accounts. You want to delegate and low impact accounts. You want to create room for your top salespeople to continue to grow. Build SBU units, feed clients that maybe don't fit, and be okay with clients that are low profitability and don't fit your long-term goals. Be okay with them leaving. Not everyone needs to be the client of your firm. And what ends up resulting, if you follow this path, typically we'll see that you'll be able to write more accounts at larger revenue sizes, which lead to growth over time. And we actually, rather than having a minimum account threshold that's set, it's good to have an adjusting minimum account threshold that changes with niche focus and industry based on individuals. So you're constantly pushing your salespeople to see the value in focusing upstream and up market. It will result in more income from them, more income from the agency, and more opportunity for everyone else on their team within the agency. So market, we talked a little bit earlier about how the market's going to impact your revenue and how does it affect, right? So right now we've been in a hard market on the P&C side, a little bit tougher on the life and health side, really tough on the workers' comp side. So depending on your niche, things have been different. But depending on those tailwinds, you're either it's easier to grow or it's harder to grow. And certain lines right now, again, in commercial lines property, it's been pretty easy to go, even though it's been a lot of work, it's been really hard. Firms have been growing on average. Firms that grow because of the market or shrink because of the market, they are not performing best practices within their firm. And what we've seen is the average firm is thinks they're growing a lot, but they're really just the beneficiaries of a hard property market, and the growth really, the organic growth is really not that strong. So it's good to look at sales velocity, which is revenue generated by new sales, not just net organic growth. So to think about that, if you sales velocity of 10% would be $1 million on a $10 million agency. That'd be net new. You're likely to have some linkage. And so what we typically say is if you want to grow 15%, your sales velocity probably needs to be north of 20%. And in a good year with a good hard market, that might mean you get a 25% growth rate on a 20% new business. In a tough year, that might be a 12% growth rate. But the point is, if you target the correct sales velocity, then you're not letting the market dictate how much you're growing year in and year out. Finally, we're talking about organic growth through human capital strategy. At the end of the day, an insurance broker is a human capital intense business. You don't buy factories or widgets or big pieces of equipment. You train people. They're your greatest asset. They're what allows the quality of your staff, your sales staff, your service staff, your back office, that is going to result in you winning more business and increasing your equity value over the long run. And it's a feedback loop. Hiring the right people, training the right people results in better success, which allows you to hire and train the right people. So like anything, really hard to get off the ground, really hard to get going. Once the flywheel gets going, it's hard to maintain, but it's maybe you have inertia on your side once you get it going. So the reality in the industry, we're going to lose about 400,000 workers to attrition by 2026. So human capital is a scarce resource in this industry, and training has never been more important than it is today. And what we're seeing is that it also leads to a bunch of opportunity because the firms that are actually growing that next generation, the younger owned firms that are putting effort into hiring and retaining talent, they're actually growing at a much higher organic rates than ever before because they're taking business from firms which are shrinking because their workforce is shrinking and retiring and just don't have the energy they used to have. We see a pretty strong correlation between weighted average producer age and growth, and you want that age to be a little bit younger than the average. Not that you don't want, senior producers in there. It's that you want to make sure you have a spread. One of the ways to track this outside of age is that you're dedicating around 2% of your revenue for net unvalidated payroll on a regular basis. That's probably like the baseline expectation. If you really want to grow, you probably need to increase that over time. And the idea is if you could do, again, 10% growth with your current workforce, their capacity to grow shrinks over time, even if they get better. And you have to constantly be backfilling the pipeline of young salespeople to fulfill the needs for growth in the future. Also, when you think about revenue, and it's on this page, $250,000 in revenue per employee is a good place. I mean, you might be a little bit lower, you might be a little bit more, but so you should track this for your own firm. But it's a good way to think about hiring needs. If you're going to be growing, you're going to be hiring. It's a constant flywheel. So you have to plan in that in advance, and it takes time, and you're not going to have a 100% hit rate no matter how good you are. So you have to build in budget in failure. And so it's a constant, it's not well, maybe we should hire more people. It's if you want to grow, you will end up hiring and training more and developing more people. And that's probably the biggest challenge that we see is people get tapped out because it's been the same, if it's a small firm, it might be the same 20 people who've been doing the work for 10 years, and then they're just backfilling replacements, which isn't growth. So to recap what we've talked about, niche specialization is key. Make sure your sales picture, pick a major, maybe a minor as well. You want to have a sales culture. At the end of the day, an insurance broker is a sales organization. That's what you guys exist to do. Very different from a carrier, which is a risk management-based business. You want to diversify revenue streams, not because you want to be a generalist, but you start to build intentionality into how you expand your niches. You want to prioritize client relationships and experience. You want to build collateral around them. You want to make sure that they care about them specifically and you know about their business. You're not just reaching out there so that you can get a BOR. You want to implement and referral programs, and you want to build operational efficiencies that allow you to hire and train people on a regular basis. You need talent recruiting infrastructure and OD&L work infrastructure in order to continue to grow and hit your goals. Organic growth is king. We have a large database and we track metrics by performance. And ultimately, the vast majority of the time, if a firm can hit above average organic growth rates, they can fix their challenges over time and it reduces the pain significantly. Whereas if a firm struggles with organic growth and has a lot of bloat, the path to fixing that is a much harder and there's a lot more pain involved with it. So what we always say, like if you have a challenge, sometimes the right thing to do is just go write another new piece of business. Finally, talking about equity value, taking this back to the beginning, valuation to optimization, we're the right partners for you, and we care about it not because of just increasing your value, but because it gives you optionality to be in control of your future. And we're excited to talk to you about how you can action on some of the things that we talked about today. Our next series about the operational efficiency portion, we'll talk a little bit more about how do you build the team, how do you structure the firm on the back office to support the front office that we discussed today. Appreciate your time. Looking forward to talking to you.